disinherited and banished from her own home, but the widowed duke, everyone feared, offered his hand. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining us from, and subscribe if you love romantic stories like this. Now, let's fall into this tale together. They say fortune favors the bold, but in the frozen January of 1885, inside the mahogany-paneled walls of the Ashford mansion on Fifth Avenue, Violet Sterling learned that fortune favored only those ruthless enough to steal it. 3 signatures on parchment. That was all it took to erase 20 years of her father's love and reduce her to nothing more than an inconvenience to be discarded. The reading of the will took place in her father's library, a room that still smelled of his cigars and leather-bound ledgers. Violet sat rigid in the chair across from the massive oak desk, her black mourning dress suffocating in its formality. It had been only 4 days since they'd lowered Benjamin Sterling into the frozen ground of Greenwood Cemetery. 4 days since pneumonia had stolen the railroad magnate who'd built an empire from nothing. The room was crowded, but not with mourners who cared. Violet recognized them for what they were, vultures waiting for the feast. Her stepmother, Vivian Sterling, sat in the place of honor beside the desk. She wore widow's weeds that had cost more than most families earned in a year, black silk from Paris, jet beads that caught the gaslight, a veil of Belgian lace, her handkerchief pressed delicately to dry eyes. Violet knew better. Vivian had married her father only 2 years ago, a beautiful widow herself, 20 years his junior. She'd come with impeccable references, flawless manners, and a smile that never quite reached her calculating eyes. Standing behind Vivian was Theodore Sterling, Teddy to his friends, though Violet suspected he had few real ones. Her stepbrother, 20 years old, soft around the middle despite his expensive tailoring, with the red-rimmed eyes and shaking hands of a man who spent too many nights at the gambling tables. He wasn't looking at the solicitor. He was staring at the Baroque clock on the mantelpiece, as if willing the ordeal to end so he could return to whatever den of vice awaited him. The family solicitor, Arthur Pemberton, cleared his throat. He was a man of 60 with silver hair and the kind of face that inspired confidence, which made him perfect for the work he did. His law offices on Wall Street handled the affairs of half the wealthy families in New York. He'd known Violet since she was a child. Today he wouldn't meet her eyes. "If we are all settled," Pemberton said, his voice carefully neutral, "we shall proceed with the last will and testament of Benjamin Michael Sterling." "Please, Mr. Pemberton," Vivian sighed, her voice trembling with theatrical grief. "Let us simply proceed. My heart cannot bear this strain much longer." Violet's fingers tightened on the arms of her chair. The wood was smooth, warm from the fire crackling in the hearth. This chair, this desk, this entire house, her father had built it all. She'd grown up in these rooms. Her mother had died giving birth to her, and it had been just Violet and her father for 17 years before Vivian appeared. "Where is the codicil?" Violet asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, hollow, brittle. "Father amended his will 3 months ago. I was there. He said he'd secured my dowry and the deed to the summer house in Newport." Pemberton's fingers twitched on the document before him. "I'm afraid, Miss Sterling, that no such codicil exists in the official registry. We are operating from the will dated April of 1883. 1883. 6 months before her father married Vivian. 6 months before Teddy came to live with them." "That's impossible." Violet stood, her chair scraping against the Persian rug. "I witnessed it myself. He signed it right there at that desk. You were there, Mr. Pemberton. You notarized it. You are a hysterical girl who has just lost her father," Vivian said sharply. The mask of grief slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and predatory underneath. "Sit down, Violet. You're embarrassing yourself." Pemberton cleared his throat again and began to read. The legal language washed over Violet like cold water. She tried to follow, tried to make sense of the words, but they kept slipping away from her, each one a small violence. The Fifth Avenue mansion, to Vivian, to be held in trust for Theodore. The summer cottage in Newport, to Vivian. The railroad shares, to Vivian, with Theodore as beneficiary upon her death. The accounts at the Bank of New York, to Vivian. The art collection, the stables, the yacht, the box at the Metropolitan Opera. Vivian, Vivian, Vivian. "And to my daughter, Violet Adelaide Sterling." Pemberton's voice dropped lower, almost apologetic. "I leave the sum of $500 and my warmest wishes for her future happiness." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the fire seemed to stop crackling. $500. It wouldn't last 3 months in New York. It wouldn't cover the cost of the dress she was wearing. There is, Pemberton added, his voice barely above a whisper, one additional provision. As Miss Sterling remains unmarried past her 20th year, which she has recently attained, her residence at the Sterling household is at the discretion of the primary beneficiary. Violet looked at Teddy. He was smiling now, a small, satisfied curve of his mouth. I want her room, he said simply. It has the best light. Perfect for my billiards table. Vivian stood, smoothing her skirts with gloved hands. She didn't look at Pemberton. She looked directly at Violet with eyes like polished stone. You are unmarried, Violet, and frankly, with your lack of prospects and your difficult disposition, you have become a burden this household can no longer support. Theodore needs his space. You're a grown woman. It's time you made your own way. You can't mean to evict me, Violet whispered. It's been 4 days since he died. 4 days. Don't be dramatic. Vivian waved a dismissive hand. We're not heartless. You may stay tonight to pack your things, but I'll need you gone by noon tomorrow. I've heard the garment factories in the Lower East Side are looking for workers, or perhaps you could find a position as a governess. You did have some education, didn't you? This is my house. The words came out louder than Violet intended, shaking with barely contained rage. My mother's portrait hangs in that hallway. My father built this library for me. My blood is in these walls. And now, Teddy laughed, stepping forward with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never been denied anything. Your blood is walking out the door. Noon tomorrow, sister dear. Don't be late. Violet turned to Pemberton, silently begging him to intervene, to remember the little girl whose father had brought her to his offices, who'd sat on his knee while he taught her to count on an abacus. But he was already closing his leather portfolio, already reaching for his coat. I am sorry, Miss Sterling, he said, not meeting her eyes. The law is the law. Violet ran. She didn't want them to see her cry. She ran through the entrance hall, past the marble staircase where her mother had once descended in silk gowns, past the portrait gallery where generations of Sterlings stared down in judgment. She ran to her room. No, not her room anymore. Teddy's room now, and locked the door. She collapsed against it, sliding to the floor as the tears finally came. Great, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. Everything was gone. Her father, her home, her future. She had no family, no money, no prospects. She was 20 years old and utterly alone in the world, or so she thought. That night, as sleet battered the windows and the temperature dropped below freezing, Violet packed a single trunk. She moved mechanically, her mind numb. A few dresses, sturdy ones suitable for work. Her mother's jewelry, a pearl necklace, small diamond earrings, the locket with the tiny painted portrait, her father's watch, a photograph of him in a silver frame, her journals and the few books that had been her mother's. She wouldn't give Vivian and Teddy the satisfaction of throwing her out at noon. She would leave before dawn, on her own terms. At 4 in the morning, when even the servants were still asleep, Violet slipped out through the service entrance. The cold hit her like a physical blow. The sleet had turned to snow, thick, wet flakes that immediately soaked through her cloak. She dragged her trunk down the front steps, her boots slipping on the ice. Fifth Avenue was deserted, a canyon of dark mansions and gas lamps haloed in snow. Violet started walking south toward Grand Central Depot. She would take the first train, somewhere, Boston perhaps, or Philadelphia, somewhere she could find work, start over, become someone new. She'd made it 3 blocks when she heard the horses. At first, she thought it might be a police wagon or perhaps a late-night delivery, but the carriage that emerged from the swirling snow was neither. It was a private coach, massive and elegant, painted a black so deep it seemed to swallow the gaslight. The team of 4 horses were thoroughbreds, their breath steaming in the frigid air. There was no family crest on the door. Instead, there was a coat of arms she didn't recognize, a silver shield bearing a lion and a thorn bush, topped with a ducal coronet. The carriage slowed, then stopped directly beside her. Violet stepped back, her heart suddenly hammering. At this hour, in this weather, nothing good could come from a stranger stopping. The door swung open. Get in. The voice was deep, cultured, with the unmistakable accent of British aristocracy. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Violet clutched her cloak tighter. I don't know you. No, the voice agreed, but I knew your father, and I gave him my word that if the vultures ever came for you, I wouldn't let them pick your bones clean. Now get in before you freeze to death. I won't ask a third time. A gloved hand extended from the darkness of the carriage. In the dim light, Violet could see the glint of a signet ring and the crisp white cuff of an expensive shirt. She looked back toward the mansion, barely visible now through the snow. Then she looked at the hand. She took it. The interior of the carriage was warmer than any room in her father's house had been for the past week. It smelled of leather, expensive tobacco, and something else. Something foreign and masculine that Violet couldn't quite place. The seats were upholstered in burgundy velvet, and a small lamp cast a warm glow over the polished wood interior. The man sat opposite her, half in shadow. As the carriage lurched forward, picking up speed, the lamplight illuminated his face. He was perhaps 35, with dark hair silvering at the temples, and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite, all sharp angles and hard planes. His eyes were an unsettling shade of grey, like steel or storm clouds. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow. He wore evening clothes, perfectly tailored, with a heavy wool coat draped over his shoulders. He was studying her with the same intensity that she was studying him. "There's a dry cloak under the seat," he said, his accent clipping the words. "British, definitely, upper class. Put it on. You're dripping on the upholstery." It was a cruel thing to say, but his tone lacked malice. It was simply pragmatic, matter of fact. Violet found the cloak, heavy wool lined with silk, and wrapped it around herself, discarding her soaked outer layer. The warmth was immediate and almost painful as blood rushed back to her frozen skin. "Who are you?" she asked. "Sebastian Hartley," he replied, "Duke of Hartley. Though I find Americans have trouble with formal titles, so most simply call me Hartley." He paused. "Your father and I were business partners, the Union Pacific expansion." He was one of the few men in this country who understood that a handshake still means something. "I don't remember him mentioning you. We met primarily in Chicago and San Francisco. Railroad business. I've only been in New York a handful of times." His eyes narrowed slightly. "But he wrote to me, often, and in his last letter, 3 weeks ago, he expressed concern about his new wife's ambitions." Violet felt something cold settle in her stomach. You knew she would do this." "I suspected. Your father was a brilliant businessman, Miss Sterling, but he was a trusting man. In our world, that is a fatal flaw." He tapped his walking stick against the roof of the carriage, and the vehicle picked up speed. "He trusted your stepmother. He trusted his solicitor. And now he's dead, and you're homeless. The doctor said it was pneumonia. The doctor was Dr. Silas Grayson, was he not?" Hartley's voice was very quiet now. "Dr. Grayson, who owed $15,000 to various gambling establishments. Dr. Grayson, whose debts were mysteriously settled in full the day after he signed your father's death certificate." Violet's breath caught. "You're suggesting—" "I'm suggesting nothing," Hartley interrupted. "I am merely observing, and what I observe is that you are a lamb who has just walked out of a slaughterhouse. You need to become something else, Miss Sterling, something with teeth." The journey took hours. They traveled through the night and into the gray dawn, leaving Manhattan behind, crossing into Westchester, then Connecticut, following the coast. Violet dozed fitfully, exhaustion finally overcoming shock. When she woke, the sun was rising over the ocean, and they were approaching Newport. She'd been to Newport before, of course. Her father had owned a cottage here, though cottage was a laughable understatement for the 40-room mansion overlooking the Atlantic. But that was gone now, signed away to Vivian, along with everything else. Hartley's estate was on the eastern edge of the island, away from the main cluster of mansions along Bellevue Avenue. As they turned up a long drive lined with bare winter trees, Violet caught her first glimpse of the house. It was nothing like the cheerful, ostentatious palaces the Vanderbilts and Astors had built. This was something older, darker. The architecture was Richardsonian Romanesque, heavy stone, rounded arches, a tower at one corner that looked more fortress than ornament. Gargoyles perched on the cornices, their stone faces worn smooth by ocean wind. Ivy covered the walls like veins, black and skeletal in winter. "Welcome to Hartley House," the Duke said as the carriage rolled to a stop. Or as the local servants call it, the Haunted Abbey. Charming, isn't it? The massive oak doors opened before they'd even ascended the steps. A line of servants stood in the entrance hall, silent and still as statues. At their head was an older woman with steel-grey hair, pulled back so severely it seemed to stretch her face. "Mrs. Blackwood," Hartley addressed her without preamble. "Miss Sterling will be staying in the East Wing. See that she's bathed, fed, and given appropriate clothing. Those rags she's wearing can be burned." Burned? Violet protested, finally finding her voice. But these are reminders of your humiliation. Hartley cut her off. If you're to stay under my roof, you'll look the part of a guest, not a refugee. He turned toward a set of double doors off the main hall. Get some rest, Miss Sterling. Tomorrow we begin. Begin what? He paused, his hand on the door handle. Your education. The East Wing was magnificent. The bedroom they gave her was twice the size of her room in New York, with a massive four-poster bed draped in midnight blue velvet, a fireplace large enough to stand in, and windows overlooking the Atlantic. But despite the luxury, there was something cold about it, something austere. Mrs. Blackwood supervised while a maid filled a copper tub with steaming water. His Grace keeps unusual hours, the housekeeper said, her voice clipped and businesslike. Breakfast is at 7. He expects punctuality. You'll find appropriate clothing in the wardrobe. Dinner is at 8. Do not be late. After she left, Violet sank into the hot water and finally allowed herself to think about what had just happened. She'd been rescued, she supposed that was the word for it, by a British duke she'd never met, a man who'd apparently been her father's business partner, who'd known about Vivian's schemes, who'd been waiting in the snow at 4 in the morning to intercept her. It didn't make sense. Men like Sebastian Hartley didn't rescue penniless orphans out of the goodness of their hearts, which meant he wanted something from her. The question was, what? She found out the next morning. Violet woke at dawn, disoriented by the unfamiliar room and the sound of waves crashing against rocks. The wardrobe, as promised, contained clothing, beautiful dresses in rich colors, all perfectly sized. Someone had taken her measurements while she slept, which should have been alarming, but was merely one more strange detail in an already surreal situation. She dressed in a practical day dress of deep green wool and made her way downstairs. Following the sound of voices and the smell of coffee, she found herself in a breakfast room overlooking the ocean. Hartley was already there, reading a newspaper, the New York Tribune, and drinking what looked like black coffee. He'd changed into day clothes, a charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, with a burgundy waistcoat and a watch chain. He looked up when she entered. You're punctual. Good. Sit. Violet sat. A servant immediately appeared with coffee. Warm bread, butter, jam, eggs, bacon. The kind of breakfast she used to take for granted and might never have again, if not for this strange turn of fate. I assume you spent the night wondering why I've brought you here, Hartley said, setting aside his paper. The answer is quite simple. I made a promise to your father, and I keep my promises. What kind of promise? That if anything happened to him, I would ensure you weren't left defenseless. He took a sip of his coffee. Your father was a self-made man, Miss Sterling. He understood that the world is full of predators. He wanted to make sure you could defend yourself. I don't understand. You barely knew him. On the contrary, we'd been partners for 3 years. We spent months together on railroad business, traveling from Chicago to San Francisco, from Denver to Seattle. In all that time, he never once lied to me, never once tried to cheat me, never once broke his word. In the world of American business, forgive me for saying so, that made him extraordinarily rare. Hartley set down his cup and leaned forward, his grey eyes intense. Your father understood what your stepmother was from the beginning. He knew she'd married him for his money, but he was lonely and he was tired, and he convinced himself that a transactional marriage was better than no marriage at all. He thought he could control her with the will. He amended it, as you said, to protect you, but he didn't realize how deep her corruption ran. She destroyed the codicil, Violet said quietly. She did more than that. She had Pemberton forged documents backdating the current will. She has the lawyer, the banker, and likely half a dozen other officials in her pocket. If you try to challenge this through the courts, you'll lose. She has money now, your father's money, and money buys everything in this country. Then what can I do? Violet heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it. I have $500 and no prospects. Even if I wanted to fight her, I don't have the means. No, Hartley agreed. But I do. He stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the grey ocean. In England, Miss Sterling, we have a concept called the long game. Revenge isn't something you achieve overnight. It's something you plan, meticulously, patiently. You study your enemy. You find their weaknesses. You wait for the perfect moment, and then you strike so decisively that they never recover. He turned back to face her. I'm going to teach you to play the long game. I'm going to teach you everything your father would have taught you if he'd lived. How to read a balance sheet, how to spot corruption in accounts, how to understand the flow of money and power. But more than that, I'm going to teach you how to move through society, how to weaponize your charm, your intelligence, your very presence. I'm going to teach you to be someone your stepmother cannot dismiss, cannot ignore, cannot destroy. Why? Violet asked. Why would you do this? Hartley was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, almost human. Because 3 years ago, my wife died, and the world said I killed her. I didn't. It was an accident. A terrible, senseless accident. But that didn't matter. Society decided I was guilty, and I became a pariah. I left England because I couldn't bear to walk through rooms full of people who thought I was a murderer. He met her eyes. Your father never believed the rumors. He never asked me about it, never treated me differently because of it. He saw me as I was, not as the world painted me, and when I lost everything, when I had to rebuild my life in a foreign country, he helped me. So yes, Miss Sterling, I'm going to help you, because your father helped me. And because I know what it's like to be thrown away by people who should have protected you. Violet felt tears prick her eyes, but forced them back. What do you want in return? In return, Hartley said with a thin smile, you're going to help me destroy your stepmother's reputation so thoroughly that when we finally take back your inheritance, New York society will cheer for her downfall. For the next 4 weeks, Hartley House became Violet's university, and the Duke her sole professor. The days began at dawn. While the household was still waking, Hartley would summon her to the library, a cavernous room lined floor to ceiling with books, maps, and architectural blueprints. There, over coffee that was always too strong and too bitter, he would drill her on subjects no finishing school had ever taught. Read this, he commanded on the third day, tossing a leather-bound ledger onto her lap. These are the accounts for the Sterling Railroad holdings. Find the discrepancy. Violet stared at the columns of numbers, her head already aching. I don't know how to read corporate accounts. Learn. He returned to his own work, a stack of correspondence that seemed to arrive by the sackful every morning. You have 2 hours. If you don't find it, you skip luncheon. The threat of hunger sharpened her mind wonderfully. Violet bent over the ledger, studying each entry. Timber purchases, coal supplies, worker wages, equipment maintenance. The numbers blurred together at first, a meaningless jumble. But gradually, patterns began to emerge, and then she saw it. Here, she said, 90 minutes later. The coal purchases for the Western Line, they're listed at $4 per ton, but on this earlier page, the market rate for the same month is listed at $2.50. Someone skimming $1.50 per ton. Hartley looked up, and for the first time something like approval flickered in his eyes. Correct. Your stepmother has been systematically overcharging the railroad for supplies and pocketing the difference. She's doing it across every division of your father's business. In 6 months, she's stolen nearly $70,000. Violet felt sick. How do you know this? Because I'm a shareholder in your father's railroad. When I started noticing irregularities, I hired investigators. He closed his own ledger. The theft is real, Miss Sterling, but proving it in court would take years and cost a fortune. By the time the case was settled, your stepmother would have moved all the money overseas. No, we need a different approach. What approach? We destroy her socially first, make her a pariah, and only then, when she's vulnerable and isolated, do we strike legally. But it wasn't just numbers. Hartley's education covered everything. In the afternoons, he would drill her on New York society. He had an encyclopedic memory for scandal, weakness, and leverage. Mrs. Caroline Astor, he would quiz her. What is her greatest fear? Being displaced as the arbiter of New York society. Violet would answer. Correct. And how would you use that? By suggesting that Vivian is attempting to buy her way into the 400, Mrs. Astor despises social climbers. Good. Lord knows your stepmother has been trying hard enough. Hartley made a note in his leather journal. What about Cornelius Vanderbilt the Younger? Desperate to be taken seriously as more than his grandfather's heir, sensitive about accusations of inherited rather than earned wealth. Excellent. You see, Miss Sterling, everyone has weaknesses. The key is identifying them and knowing exactly when to exploit them. In the evenings, they worked on her presentation, how she walked, how she spoke, how she held herself in a room. You're still making yourself small, Hartley observed one night as they practiced in the ballroom. Yes, Hartley House had a ballroom, though it looked like it hadn't been used in years. You're slouching. Why? Habit, Violet admitted. If I was small, Vivian didn't notice me. If I was quiet, Teddy didn't mock me. Hartley crossed the floor until he stood directly in front of her. He was tall, easily 6 feet, and his presence was overwhelming up close. That strategy worked when you were trying to survive in their house, but now you need to do more than survive. You need to conquer. He placed his hands on her shoulders, heavy and warm, adjusting her posture. Straighten your spine. Shoulders back, chin up. His thumbs pressed gently but firmly. You have nothing left to lose, Miss Sterling. They've already taken everything. What more can they do to you? They can humiliate me, Violet whispered. Only if you value their opinion. His voice was close to her ear now, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. Do you? Violet thought about Vivian's cold eyes, Teddy's cruel laughter, Pemberton's cowardice. No, she said, and meant it. Good. Hartley's hands lingered for a moment longer than necessary before he stepped back. Tomorrow, we go to war. The following morning, a dressmaker arrived from New York. Not just any dressmaker, but Madame Celeste, who dressed the Astors and the Vanderbilts. She brought with her 3 assistants and enough fabric to outfit a small theater company. His Grace sent word, Madame Celeste explained in her thick French accent, though Violet suspected she was actually from Brooklyn. He said you need a gown for Mrs. Astor's winter ball, something unforgettable. They settled on a design that made Violet's breath catch. The fabric was silk the color of burgundy wine, so dark it looked almost black in certain lights. The bodice was fitted, almost severe, with a high neck and long sleeves. But the back plunged dramatically, exposing her shoulders and the length of her spine. It's too much, Violet protested. I'm in mourning. Exactly, Hartley said. He'd been watching from the doorway, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Your stepmother wants you forgotten. This dress announces that you will not be forgotten, that you refuse to disappear quietly. Mourning be damned. You're declaring war. The gown took 2 weeks to complete. During that time, Hartley's lessons intensified. He taught her card games and how to spot a cheat. He taught her which wines were fashionable and which were déclassé. He taught her how to make small talk that cut like a knife, how to deliver an insult so subtle the target didn't realize they'd been wounded until hours later. The American elite, he explained one evening over dinner, are obsessed with European titles and European manners. They'll forgive almost anything if it comes from someone with a coronet. Your stepmother married money, but she'll never have breeding. You, on the other hand, were born to this world. You're Benjamin Sterling's daughter, descended from old Knickerbocker families on your mother's side. That means something here, even if you've lost the money. And you? Violet asked. You're a duke. Why haven't they embraced you? Hartley's expression darkened. Because of Arabella, my wife. The rumors followed me across the Atlantic. American society may love titles, but they love scandal more. I'm tolerated at best, shunned at worst. But if I arrive at Mrs. Astor's ball with you on my arm, the wronged heiress, the tragic daughter, suddenly I'm not the villain of my own story. I'm the rescuer in yours. So I'm a prop, Violet said, trying to keep the bitterness from her voice. To a way to rehabilitate your reputation. No, Hartley set down his wineglass. You're a partner. There's a difference. I need you. Yes, but you need me too. Together, we're formidable. Separately, he shrugged. Separately, we're just 2 people the world has decided to discard. Mrs. Caroline Astor's winter ball was the event of the season. An invitation was a sign of acceptance into the highest echelons of New York society. To be excluded was social death. Violet hadn't expected an invitation. She'd been banished from her home, disinherited, effectively excommunicated from the world she'd been born into. But 3 days before the ball, a cream envelope arrived at Hartley House, addressed to Miss Violet Sterling. Inside was an invitation engraved on heavy cardstock, requesting the pleasure of her company at Mrs. Astor's Fifth Avenue mansion. How? Violet asked, staring at it. Hartley smiled, a rare, genuine smile. I may be scandalous, Miss Sterling, but I'm still a duke. When I informed Mrs. Astor that I would be attending and that I would be bringing the daughter of Benjamin Sterling, a man who donated generously to her favorite charities, she could hardly refuse. To snub you would be to snub me, and even Mrs. Astor doesn't snub dukes. The night of the ball, Violet stood in front of the mirror in her room while 2 maids arranged her hair. They'd pulled it back in an elegant chignon, leaving a few curls to frame her face. The burgundy gown fit perfectly, scandalously perfect. She looked older, harder, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness. She looked dangerous. There was a knock at the door. Hartley entered, and for a moment he simply stared. He was in full evening dress, black tailcoat, white waistcoat, white tie. His dark hair was brushed back, the silver at his temples catching the lamplight. He looked every inch the aristocrat, every inch the duke. "You'll do," he said finally, his voice rough. "Just, you'll do?" Violet turned from the mirror, one eyebrow raised. "I rather thought I looked spectacular." "You look like a woman who could burn down an empire," Hartley said, "which is precisely what we need. Shall we?" The carriage ride into Manhattan took 2 hours. Violet spent most of it trying to calm her racing heart. Everything depended on tonight. If she faltered, if she showed weakness, Vivian would win. She would be nothing, nobody, forgotten. Fifth Avenue blazed with light. Every mansion had its windows illuminated, gaslights and candles turning the winter night into artificial day. Mrs. Astor's home, a massive limestone palace that took up half a block, was the brightest of all. Carriages lined the street, disgorging women in furs and diamonds, men in silk top hats and opera cloaks. Violet recognized faces she'd known her entire life. The Vanderbilts, the Belmonts, the Schermerhorns, old money and new money, mingling under the banner of Mrs. Astor's approval. Their carriage pulled up to the entrance. A footman opened the door, offering his hand. Hartley descended first, then turned to help Violet down. "Ready?" he murmured. "No," she admitted. "Perfect. Fear makes you sharp." He offered his arm. "Remember, you belong here. They're the ones who should be afraid." They ascended the marble steps. At the entrance, a major domo stood with a list, announcing each guest as they entered. His Grace, Sebastian Hartley, Duke of Hartley. The man's voice boomed into the ballroom beyond. There was a pause. Then, Miss Violet Adelaide Sterling. The effect was electric. Violet felt it the moment she stepped into the ballroom. Heads turning, conversations stopping mid-sentence, fans snapping shut. The gossip rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water. The Sterling girl, the one who was disinherited, with the Duke of Hartley, the one whose wife died mysteriously. Scandalous. The ballroom was magnificent, all gilt and crystal, with gas chandeliers blazing overhead and walls hung with crimson silk. An orchestra played Strauss from a balcony overlooking the dance floor. There must have been 300 people present, all dressed in their finest, all staring at her. Hartley leaned close. "Find them," he whispered. Violet scanned the crowd. It didn't take long. Vivian and Teddy were holding court near the refreshment table, surrounded by a cluster of social climbers and minor aristocrats. Vivian wore purple, the color of royalty, or so she liked to think, with diamonds at her throat that had been Violet's mother's. Teddy stood beside her, already flushed with champagne, laughing too loudly at something a young woman had said. When Vivian saw them, the laughter died in her throat. Her face went white, then red. Teddy nearly dropped his glass. "Shall we?" Hartley asked. They walked toward them. The crowd parted, eager for the confrontation, eager for blood. This was better than theater, better than opera. This was real drama, unfolding before their eyes. "Stepmother," Violet said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "Teddy, you seem surprised. Did you think the cold would kill me?" Vivian recovered quickly, her face sliding into a tight smile. "Violet, we were told you'd gone west to seek your fortune. How unexpected to see you here." "I found a different sort of fortune," Violet replied, glancing at Hartley. "His Grace has been extraordinarily generous." The implication hung in the air. Violet saw Vivian's eyes narrow, saw the calculation there. "I see," Vivian said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Well, Your Grace, you have interesting taste in charity cases, though I must warn you, this girl has a history of hysteria and delusion. She's made all sorts of wild accusations about her poor dear father's will." "Has she?" Hartley's voice was very quiet, but it cut through the murmurs like a blade. "How curious. I've made similar accusations about your accounting practices, Mrs. Sterling. Perhaps we're both delusional, or perhaps we're both right." Vivian's smile faltered. "I beg your pardon." "We're not here to beg anything," Hartley said. "That we're here to dance." He turned his back on Vivian, the ultimate insult, and offered his arm to Violet. "Miss Sterling." The orchestra had started a waltz. Hartley led her onto the floor, his hand settling at her waist, firm and possessive. They began to move, and Violet was grateful for the weeks of practice. Her body knew the steps now, knew how to follow his lead without thinking. She's terrified, Violet whispered as they spun past Vivian. Did you see her hands shaking? I did, Hartley replied. But your brother is the weak link. Look at him. Over Hartley's shoulder, Violet caught sight of Teddy. He wasn't looking at them. He was looking toward the exit, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. He signaled desperately for a servant with a champagne tray. He's crumbling, Hartley observed. Tonight, we apply pressure. The waltz ended. Hartley bowed, his eyes holding hers for a long moment. Go, he said quietly. I'll keep the mothers distracted. You corner the son. Violet found Teddy on one of the terraces overlooking the winter garden. He was alone, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands, his breath fogging in the cold air. Teddy, she said. He jumped, nearly dropping the cigarette. Violet, Jesus Christ, you scared me. What the hell are you doing here? I could ask you the same question. Shouldn't you be inside, charming the heiresses? Or have you already gambled away their interest along with father's money? I don't know what you're talking about, Teddy said, but his voice cracked. I know about the debts, Teddy. It was a lie. Well, half a lie. Hartley suspected debts, but Violet stated it as fact. I know about the men you owe money to, the ones from Tammany Hall, the ones who don't accept excuses. Teddy's face went grey. You're bluffing. Am I? Violet stepped closer, pitching her voice low and urgent. Pemberton told us everything. How you forced him to alter the will, how you forged father's signature, how you threatened him. It wasn't me. The words burst out of Teddy, champagne and fear loosening his tongue. It was mother. I mean, my mother, Vivian. She made me do it. She said if I didn't help her, she'd cut me off and let my creditors break my legs. Violet's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. She forged the date. She practiced for weeks, Teddy hissed, glancing over his shoulder toward the ballroom. Violet, listen, you can't tell anyone. If the courts find out the will is contested, they'll freeze the estate. I'll be ruined. The men I owe, they'll kill me. Then help me, Violet said. Don't give me the practice sheets. I know she kept them. She keeps everything. Teddy hesitated, fear warring with self-preservation. They're in the safe in her private sitting room. I don't have the key, but you know where she keeps it. She wears it always, in that locket around her neck. Teddy looked at her, sweat dripping down his temples despite the cold. Violet, if I help you, will you tell the Duke to call off his investigators? I know he's been looking into my markers. Get me the proof, Violet said, and I'll make sure you walk away with enough to pay your debts. But only you. Your mother goes down. Teddy looked back at the ballroom, where Vivian was frantically trying to maintain her composure, surrounded by smiling vultures who smelled blood in the water. He looked at Violet, at the determination in her eyes. Self-preservation won. Tomorrow, he whispered. The old boathouse at Battery Park, noon. I'll bring what I can find. Violet? Vivian's voice shrieked from the doorway. She stood there, her face twisted with rage. Get away from him! Teddy immediately stepped back, looking guilty. Get away from him, Vivian hissed, storming onto the terrace. You poison everything you touch. I should have had you committed to an asylum, not just thrown into the street. Try it, a voice said from the shadows. Hartley stepped forward, materializing from the darkness. He moved to stand beside Violet, a silent sentinel. Vivian stopped dead. She looked from Violet to Hartley, and Violet saw the exact moment her stepmother realized the magnitude of her mistake. She wasn't fighting a powerless girl anymore. She was fighting a united front, backed by a duke's fortune and connections. This isn't over, Vivian spat, grabbing Teddy by the arm. Come, Theodore. We're leaving. They retreated, and a murmur of speculation followed them out. Violet let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Hartley's hand was there instantly, steadying her elbow. You did well, he said quietly. Teddy broke. He confessed everything. He's going to bring me proof tomorrow. Hartley went very still. Tomorrow? Where? Battery Park, the old boathouse. Noon. Hartley's face darkened. That's a trap, Violet. He's not bringing you proof. He's bringing something else. What do you mean? I mean your stepbrother is a cornered rat, and rats don't negotiate. They bite. He looked down at her, his eyes fierce in the lamplight. He's going to try to silence you permanently. A chill swept through Violet that had nothing to do with the winter air. Then we don't go. No, Hartley said, a dangerous smile spreading across his face. We go, but we don't go alone. And we certainly don't go expecting a conversation. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was both old-fashioned and intimate, sending heat through her despite the cold. "You wanted your inheritance back, Miss Sterling. Tomorrow we take it." The old boathouse at Battery Park was a relic from an earlier era, when the waterfront was used for pleasure sailing rather than commercial shipping. It sat at the edge of the water, a weathered structure of grey wood and rusted iron, abandoned except for vagrants and rats. The morning was bitterly cold, with a fog rolling in off the harbour so thick Violet could barely see 10 feet ahead. Perfect weather for an ambush. They'd left the carriage blocks away, Hartley insisting on approaching on foot. He'd armed himself, 2 pistols tucked into his coat, a walking stick that Violet suspected was weighted with lead. He'd tried to give her a small derringer, but she'd refused. "I can't shoot someone," she'd said. "You won't have to," Hartley had replied grimly. "But I might." Now they crept through the fog, the wooden planks of the wharf creaking under their feet. The boathouse loomed ahead, its doors hanging open, darkness beyond. "I'll go in first," Hartley said. "You wait here. If anything goes wrong, we go in together," Violet interrupted. "I won't hide while you face danger alone. You're as stubborn as your father," Hartley muttered, but he didn't argue further. "Stay behind me, and for God's sake, if I tell you to run, you run." They entered the boathouse. It was dark inside, smelling of rotted wood and stagnant water. Grey light filtered through gaps in the walls, creating strange shadows. The sound of water lapping against pilings echoed in the empty space. "Teddy!" Violet called out. "Yes, I'm here." For a moment, nothing. Then footsteps, and Teddy emerged from behind a stack of old crates. He looked terrible, unshaven, wild-eyed, his expensive clothes rumpled. His hands were shaking. "Violet," he said, his voice high and strained. "You came. I said I would. Do you have the documents?" Teddy let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Documents. Right. The documents." He reached into his coat. "Slowly," Hartley said, stepping forward. His voice was cold, commanding. Teddy's hand emerged holding not papers but a pistol, old heavy, the kind used for dueling a generation ago. He pointed it at Violet with a shaking hand. "I'm sorry," Teddy whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry, Violet, but she said there's no other way. She said as long as you're alive and you'll keep fighting. She said I have to fix this." "Theodore," Hartley's voice cut through the tension like steel. "Say, put down the gun." "I can't," Teddy's voice broke. "You don't understand. The men I owe, they're coming for me tomorrow. They'll kill me. Mother promised to pay them if I did this. She promised." "She's lying to you," Violet said, forcing her voice to stay calm even though her heart was hammering. "Don't you see? She'll let you hang for this. She'll claim she knew nothing about it. Teddy, please. You're not a killer." "I don't have a choice," Teddy sobbed. He cocked the pistol. "Drop it," Hartley commanded, his own weapon suddenly in his hand, aimed steadily at Teddy. "Drop it now, or I'll shoot you where you stand." Teddy panicked. He swung the pistol toward Hartley and pulled the trigger. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. Smoke filled the air. Violet screamed, but Teddy's hand had been shaking too badly. The shot went wide, splintering wood to Hartley's left. Hartley didn't hesitate. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, grabbed Teddy's wrist and twisted. Something cracked, bone or wood. Violet couldn't tell. Teddy shrieked. The pistol clattered to the floor. Hartley kicked Teddy's legs out from under him, sending him crashing to his knees. In seconds, he had Teddy pinned, face down on the filthy floor, one knee pressed between his shoulder blades. "Where are the documents?" Hartley snarled. "I don't have them," Teddy sobbed. "She burned them 2 days ago. I just came to kill her. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Hartley's hand tightened on Teddy's collar. For a moment, Violet saw something terrifying in the Duke's face. Pure rage, the desire to snap her stepbrother's neck and be done with it. "Hartley, stop," Violet said, moving forward. "You'll kill him." "He tried to kill you," Hartley said, his voice devoid of emotion. "And he failed." Violet knelt beside them, placing her hand on Hartley's arm. She could feel the tension in his muscles, the barely restrained violence. "We need him alive. If he dies, Vivian becomes the grieving mother. She wins." Hartley stared at her, his chest heaving. Slowly, the red haze seemed to clear from his eyes. He released Teddy and stood, pulling Violet up with him. "Get out of here," Hartley said to Teddy, his voice flat. "Go to California. Go to Europe, I don't care. But if I ever see you in New York again, I will finish what I started today." Teddy scrambled to his feet, cradling his broken wrist, and fled into the fog. Violet turned to Hartley. "Are you—" he stumbled. "Hartley." She caught his arm. That's when she felt the wetness. Her hand came away red. "He didn't miss entirely," Hartley said, his voice strained. He pressed his hand to his side, where blood was seeping through his coat. "How damned inconvenient timing." "Oh God," Violet breathed. "We need to get you to a doctor." "No doctors," Hartley said firmly. "Doctors ask questions. Questions lead to police. Police lead to complications." He leaned heavily on her. "Your father's townhouse, the one near Washington Square. Is it still empty?" "I think so. Vivian hasn't had time to sell it yet." "Good. That's where we're going." Getting Hartley to Washington Square was a nightmare. He'd lost more blood than he'd admitted, and by the time they reached the townhouse, he could barely stand. Violet had to half carry him up the steps, using her key, the one her father had given her years ago, the one Vivian didn't know existed, to let them in. The house was dark, dusty, cold. The furniture was covered with sheets, and the air smelled of disuse, but it was private, and right now that was all that mattered. Violet got Hartley into the parlor and onto a sofa. His coat was soaked with blood, his face grey with pain. "I need to see the wound," she said. "It's just a graze," Hartley insisted, but his hands were shaking as he tried to unbutton his waistcoat. "Let me—" Violet brushed his hands aside and carefully removed his coat, then his waistcoat, then his shirt. The wound was on his left side, just above his hip, a jagged furrow where the bullet had torn through skin and muscle, but, thankfully, hadn't lodged inside. "You're right," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's not deep, but it needs to be cleaned and bandaged." She found clean linen in an upstairs closet and water from the kitchen pump. For the next hour, she worked methodically, cleaning the wound, stopping the bleeding, binding it with strips of torn sheet. Hartley bore it stoically, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. When she was done, she sat back on her heels, exhausted. "You should rest." In a moment, Hartley's voice was rough. He looked at her, really looked at her, his grey eyes intense despite the pain. "Why did you stop me? Back in the boathouse. I could have killed him. Part of me wanted to." "I know," Violet said quietly, "but that would have made you what they say you are, a killer. And what if I am?" The question hung in the air between them. "What if the rumors about my wife are true? Are they?" Hartley closed his eyes. "Arabella died 7 years ago this winter. We'd been married 5 years. An arranged marriage. 2 great families joining forces. We were civil to each other, even friendly at times. But there was no love in not really." He opened his eyes, and Violet saw old pain there, still raw. She had a melancholy disposition, what doctors now call neurasthenia. Some days she couldn't get out of bed. Other days she was manic, full of energy, planning elaborate parties we never hosted. I didn't understand it then. I just thought she was difficult. What happened the night she died? We'd argued. About having children. She didn't want them. Said she couldn't bear the thought. I was angry. I said cruel things about duty and obligation. Then I left. Went to my study to drink myself into a stupor. His voice dropped to a whisper. 2 hours later, my valet found her at the bottom of the grand staircase. Her neck was broken. She'd been dead for at least an hour. "An accident," Violet said. That's what the inquest concluded. But the timing, the circumstances, the fact that I'd argued with her and then left her alone, it looked damning. Society decided I'd pushed her, or at least that I'd driven her to throw herself down the stairs. Either way, I was guilty in their eyes. He reached out, his fingers brushing Violet's cheek. "I've spent 7 years punishing myself. I let the world call me a murderer because part of me believed I was one. Not because I pushed her, but because I failed her. I should have seen how bad her melancholy had become. I should have gotten her help. Instead, I was too concerned with appearances, with what society expected." "That doesn't make you a killer," Violet said softly. "It makes you human, does it?" Hartley's hand cupped her face now, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "When I saw your stepbrother point that gun at you, all I felt was rage. Not fear for you, not horror at the situation, just pure, murderous rage. What does that make me?" "It makes you someone who cares," Violet said. "Someone who protects the people he—" She stopped, the word hanging unspoken between them. Hartley pulled her closer. "The people he loves," he finished, his voice rough. "Is that what you were going to say?" Violet's heart was hammering. "I don't know. I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's real or if it's just—" Proximity and danger and shared purpose. Don't you? Hartley's face was inches from hers now. Violet, I've spent 7 years avoiding connection, avoiding feeling anything for anyone. I told myself it was safer that way, that I couldn't be hurt if I didn't care. And then your father's letters started arriving, talking about his brilliant daughter, his worry for her future. And then I saw you in the snow, dragging that ridiculous trunk, refusing to cry even though your world had just ended. And I thought, what? Violet whispered. I thought, here is someone as stubborn and damaged as I am, someone who refuses to break. He leaned his forehead against hers. I told myself I was helping you for your father's sake, that it was obligation, nothing more. But that was a lie. I'm helping you because every time I look at you, I see the person I should have been, strong, unbroken, unwilling to let the world decide who you are. Hartley, Sebastian, he corrected. My name is Sebastian, and I would very much like to hear you say it. Sebastian, Violet breathed. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't the chaste kiss of a storybook romance. It was desperate and hungry, tasting of blood and smoke and fear and relief. It was the collision of two people who'd spent too long alone, who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate tragedies. Violet kissed him back, pouring everything into it, her gratitude and her anger and her hope and her fear. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the room felt different, warmer, less empty. We can't stay here, Sebastian said, though he made no move to let her go. Vivian will send people looking for you when Teddy doesn't return. Where do we go? Back to Newport, to regroup and plan our next move. He winced as he tried to sit up, and Violet pushed him gently back down. Not tonight. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we can be strategic, but tonight just rest. He caught her hand, pressing it to his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady despite everything. Stay with me. I'm not going anywhere, Violet promised. They returned to Newport the following evening, traveling after dark to avoid attention. Sebastian's wound was healing cleanly, but he moved stiffly, and Violet could see the pain in the tightness around his eyes. Mrs. Blackwood took one look at them and asked no questions, merely ordered hot baths and a late supper sent to Sebastian's study. It was there, over cold chicken and wine, that they planned their final move. The documents are gone, Sebastian said, studying a map of Manhattan spread across his desk. Teddy's confession won't hold up in court. He was under duress, and he'll recant the moment Vivian threatens him. We need something stronger. The locket, Violet said. Teddy said she keeps the key to her safe in the locket. If we can get that key, we can access the safe ourselves. Breaking and entering, Sebastian mused. Not exactly ducal behavior. I approve. He traced a finger along Fifth Avenue on the map. The house will be locked up tightly. Servants everywhere. We'd need a distraction. What kind of distraction? Sebastian smiled, and it was a predator's smile. The kind that brings everyone to the same place at the same time. A social event too important to miss. He pulled out a sheet of his personal stationery. What if the Duke of Hartley were to host a reception, a formal introduction to Newport society, an olive branch after years of self-imposed exile? Vivian would come, Violet realized. She's been trying to cultivate European connections. An invitation from you would be irresistible. Exactly. She comes here, leaves the house in New York with minimal staff. And while she's at my party, making a fool of herself, he looked at Violet. You'll be in Manhattan, in her bedroom, opening her safe. That's insane. Completely. Which is why it might actually work. The invitations went out the next day, hand-delivered by liveried footmen. The reception would be held in 1 week at Hartley House. A select guest list, only the most important families. The implication was clear. This was the Duke's return to society, and attendance was a privilege. The responses came flooding back within hours. Everyone accepted. The Vanderbilts, the Belmonts, the Schermerhorns, and yes, Mrs. Vivian Sterling, who sent a gushing note thanking His Grace for his kind consideration. She thinks she's won, Violet said, reading Vivian's response. And she thinks you're courting her for her fortune. Let her think that, Sebastian replied. Arrogance makes people careless. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Mrs. Blackwood transformed Hartley House from its usual austere state into something magnificent. Flowers brought from the greenhouses, crystal chandeliers polished until they sparkled. The ballroom opened and aired for the first time in years. Meanwhile, Sebastian drilled Violet on the layout of her father's house, on where Vivian's rooms were located, on how to open a combination safe if she could find the key. "I feel like a criminal," Violet said on the eve of the reception. "You're not a criminal," Sebastian corrected. "You're taking back what was stolen from you. There's a difference." The night of the reception arrived cold and clear. Carriages began arriving at Hartley House at 8 o'clock, disgorging women in furs and diamonds, men in white tie and tails. The house blazed with light, music pouring from the open doors. Violet watched from an upstairs window, already dressed for her own mission. Dark clothing, practical boots, a hooded cloak. She looked like a burglar because tonight, that's exactly what she was. Sebastian found her there, resplendent in his formal clothes, the picture of aristocratic elegance. Only the tightness around his mouth betrayed the pain from his wound. "The carriage is ready," he said. "It will take you to Manhattan. Mr. Davies will wait for you 3 blocks from the house. If you're not back in 2 hours, he'll come looking for you. And if I'm caught, you won't be." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "You're Benjamin Sterling's daughter. You're clever and brave, and you have every right to be in that house. But if something goes wrong, if you need help, you send word and I will come. Reception be damned. Vivian will suspect something if you leave your own party. Let her suspect. I'd burn this entire house down if it meant keeping you safe." He kissed her properly, then deeply, and Violet felt the truth of his words in the desperation of the kiss. "Go," he said when they broke apart, "and come back to me." The journey to Manhattan felt endless. Violet spent it going over the plan, over and over. Enter through the service entrance. She still had a key from her childhood. The servants, stairs to the 2nd floor. Vivian's bedroom was in the east wing, overlooking the garden. The safe was behind a portrait of her father. How fitting. The key would be in the locket Vivian always wore, except tonight she wouldn't be wearing it. She'd be in Newport High at the Duke's reception, showing off her supposed connection to European aristocracy. The carriage stopped 3 blocks from the house, as planned. Violet descended, pulling her hood up against the winter wind. The streets were quiet. Most of the wealthy families either at parties or in their country houses. She walked quickly, keeping to the shadows. The Sterling mansion loomed ahead, most of the windows dark. Only the kitchen area showed light, the reduced staff preparing a cold supper for themselves. Violet circled to the service entrance. Her key still fit. The door opened silently, well-oiled hinges making no sound. She was inside. The servants' stairs were exactly where she remembered. She climbed quickly, heart hammering, every creak of wood sounding like a gunshot in the silent house. 2nd floor, east wing. Vivian's door locked, but Violet had anticipated this. She pulled out the set of lockpicks Sebastian had given her. "A duke's education is surprisingly comprehensive," he'd said dryly, and went to work. It took 3 agonizing minutes, but finally, the lock clicked open. Vivian's bedroom was a monument to excess. Heavy drapes, gilt furniture, a massive 4-poster bed, and there, on the dressing table, the locket. Violet crossed the room and picked it up. It was heavier than she expected, gold and warm from sitting near the fireplace. She opened it. Inside, instead of a portrait or a lock of hair, there was a small key. Violet's hands were shaking as she went to her father's portrait, a painting done 3 years ago, before Vivian, before everything fell apart. She lifted it carefully off the wall. Behind it, set into the wall, was a small safe, standard combination lock, 3 numbers. Violet tried her father's birthday. Nothing. She tried her own birthday. Nothing. She tried the date of her father's death. The safe clicked open. Inside were stacks of papers, bundled and tied with ribbon. Violet pulled them out, unfolding the top sheet. It was covered in writing, the same sentence, over and over, in slightly different styles. Benjamin Michael Sterling, Benjamin M. Sterling, B. M. Sterling. Practice sheets. Vivian had been practicing forging her father's signature. Violet's hands were shaking as she sorted through the rest. There were letters from Pemberton discussing the forgery. There were the original codicil pages, not burned after all, kept as insurance. There were ledgers showing the stolen funds, the skimmed accounts, the bribes paid, everything. Vivian had kept everything. "Stupid," Violet breathed. "You stupid, arrogant woman." "Talking to yourself, sister dear." Violet spun. Teddy stood in the doorway, his right arm in a sling, his face bruised and swollen. He'd come back. "The Duke said, if you return to New York, he'd kill me." "I know." Teddy stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "But I'm already a dead man. The creditors found me in Philadelphia. They gave me a choice. Pay what I owe, or bring them something valuable as collateral. So here I am. He pulled a knife from his coat. Not a gun this time, his broken wrist couldn't manage one, but a knife was just as deadly. I'm sorry, Violet, but they want those documents. Proof of my mother's crimes means proof that I helped her. I can't let that evidence exist. Teddy, this is insane, he lunged. Violet threw herself sideways, crashing into the dressing table. Perfume bottles shattered, the sound explosive in the quiet house. Teddy came at her again, the knife flashing. She grabbed the first thing her hand found, a silver candlestick, and swung it hard. It connected with Teddy's injured arm. He screamed, dropping the knife, and Violet ran. Out of the bedroom, down the hallway, toward the main stairs. Behind her she could hear Teddy shouting, and now other voices, servants, alerted by the noise. She hit the stairs running, taking them two at a time. The front door was locked from the inside. A heavy deadbolt she'd never get open in time. The drawing room, there was a window there that opened onto the side garden. She burst into the room just as heavy footsteps thundered on the stairs behind her. The window, she ran to it, threw it open, and I don't think so. Vivian stepped out of the shadows. She must have come back early, must have suspected something. She held a pistol, small and deadly, pointed directly at Violet's chest. I knew you wouldn't stay gone, Vivian said. Her voice was eerily calm. I told Theodore we should have dealt with you more permanently from the start, but he's weak, always has been, so I suppose I'll have to do it myself. The Duke knows I'm here, Violet said, clutching the documents to her chest. If you kill me, he'll what? Storm the house? Call the police? I'll tell them you broke in, that I feared for my life and that I shot an intruder. Who will they believe, a respected widow or a disgraced duke with a scandalous past? Vivian smiled. You lose, Violet. You always were going to lose. You're just a girl. No, said a voice from the doorway. She's my wife. Vivian spun. Sebastian stood there, no longer in his formal clothes but in dark traveling gear, a pistol in his hand, aimed directly at Vivian. Behind him were two uniformed officers of the New York Police Department. My wife, Sebastian repeated, moving into the room. The Duchess of Hartley. And you've just threatened her life while she was recovering property stolen from her by means of fraud and forgery. He gestured to the officers. Officers, if you please. This is absurd, Vivian shrieked as the officers approached. We were married by special license 3 days ago, Sebastian said calmly. Perfectly legal. And as her husband, I am her legal representative. Every asset stolen from her father's estate is now mine to reclaim. He looked at Vivian with cold contempt. You gambled on her being alone and powerless. You lost. The officers took Vivian's gun and placed her in irons. She was still screaming threats and denials as they led her away. Teddy had emerged at the top of the stairs, his face white. The officers took him too, reading charges of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. And then it was just Violet and Sebastian in the silent house. Your wife, Violet said. A legal fiction, Sebastian said quickly. Necessary to claim standing in the case. We can have it annulled if you wish. I didn't want to presume. Don't, Violet interrupted. Don't you dare get noble and self-sacrificing now. You said wife. Did you mean it? Sebastian crossed the room until he stood directly in front of her. I meant every word, but I won't trap you into a marriage born of necessity and scandal. If you want an annulment, you'll have it. If you want a marriage in name only while you reclaim your fortune, you'll have that. But if you want... He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. If you want a real marriage, with a damaged duke who comes with more baggage than the Union Pacific carries in a month, then God help me, Violet. You'll have that too. Violet looked at him, at this man who'd pulled her from the snow, who'd taught her to fight, who'd taken a bullet for her, who'd married her to give her legal protection, who looked at her not like a charity case or a burden, but like someone worth fighting for. I've spent 20 years being what everyone else wanted me to be, she said. A dutiful daughter, a proper young lady, a quiet, manageable girl. I don't want to be manageable anymore, Sebastian. I want to be myself, flawed and fierce, and sometimes difficult. Good, he said, because I'm rather fond of that version of you. And I don't want a marriage in name only. I don't want legal fiction. I want... She reached up, cupping his face in her hands. I want you, all of you. Damaged baggage and scandalous past and terrible reputation. I want the man who sees me as I am and doesn't flinch. He kissed her, and this time it was different, not desperate or afraid, but sure. A promise, a beginning. Then you have me, he said against her lips. For as long as you'll keep me. Forever might be nice, Violet said. Forever it is. 6 months later, the courtroom was packed. It seemed like half of New York had turned out to witness the trial of Mrs. Vivian Sterling and her son Theodore for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence was overwhelming. The practice sheets, the forged documents, Pemberton's testimony. He'd turned on Vivian the moment he realized the Duke of Hartley had enough evidence to put him in prison alongside her. The bank records showing the systematic theft. The jury deliberated for less than an hour, guilty on all counts. Vivian was sentenced to 10 years in the women's prison at Auburn. Theodore got 7 years at Sing Sing. Pemberton was disbarred and fined everything he owned. Violet sat in the gallery, Sebastian beside her, and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet sense of closure. It's done, Sebastian said softly, taking her hand. It's done, she agreed. They left the courthouse through a side exit, avoiding the press of reporters. A carriage waited, not the dramatic black coach Sebastian had arrived in that snowy night, but something more practical, more theirs. The sterling fortune had been restored, every penny accounted for and returned. The Fifth Avenue mansion was Violet's again, though she'd decided to sell it. Too many ghosts, too many bad memories. Instead, she and Sebastian had purchased a new house on Washington Square, close to the university where Violet had enrolled. She was studying law, much to the shock of New York society. But then, the Duchess of Hartley had made shocking people something of a specialty. "What are you thinking?" Sebastian asked as the carriage rolled through the streets. "That it's strange," Violet said. 6 months ago I had nothing. Now I have everything back, the money, the house, the name. But none of that is what matters. No, no. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. What matters is that I learned I could survive without any of it, that I'm not just Benjamin Sterling's daughter or the Duchess of Hartley. I'm Violet, and Violet can set herself on fire and rise from the ashes. Sebastian pressed a kiss to the top of her head. You're mixing your metaphors. Phoenixes rise from ashes. You don't set yourself on fire. Maybe I do, Violet said with a small smile. Maybe that's what it takes sometimes. You have to burn away everything you were to become what you're meant to be. Profound. Have you been reading poetry again? Only the scandalous kind. She tilted her face up to his. I'm told the Duke of Hartley keeps quite the library of improper literature. The Duke of Hartley, Sebastian said, his eyes warm with amusement and something deeper, keeps whatever makes his Duchess happy, even terribly inappropriate poetry. Your Duchess, Violet said, is very happy indeed. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence through the streets of a city that had tried to destroy them both and failed. Above them, the summer sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the colors of fire and fortune, of endings and beginnings. Violet Sterling, no, Violet Hartley now, had lost everything and reclaimed it all. But more than that, she'd reclaimed herself, and in the process, she'd learned that sometimes the only way to survive a storm is to become the lightning. They said a lamb and a wolf could never lie down together. But then, Violet had never been a lamb, and Sebastian had never been quite the wolf the world painted him to be. They were something else entirely, something fiercer, stranger, better. They were survivors. They were partners. They were home. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel, leaving a like, sharing it with friends, and writing a comment below. Your support means everything to us and keeps us inspired to tell more stories filled with love, resilience, redemption, and second chances. At the end of this video, you'll find another unforgettable romance from our collection. Click and discover where the next story will take you. With all our appreciation, the Empire of Heart Stories team